Hello, Mr. Piland's economics class. Welcome back. Today is 42720. We're starting our last, one of our last units or subunits, if you will, on macroeconomics. We've studied the way that the United States is going through ups and downs in the business cycle. People get jobs, people lose jobs. It happens all the time, ups and downs. Well, the government actually tries to step in every once in a while and control those ups and downs. Remember, if you go up too fast, that's dangerous because inflation happens. If the value of your money loses its value too quickly, that is a bad thing. You want to have prices that are reliable instead of all over the place. If it's starting to go down and going into a recession like we seem to be doing right now, that's also dangerous because people lose their jobs and become unsure of the strength of the government. So fiscal policy is one of the tools of the federal government that is used to try to control those ups and downs. You don't want to go too high too fast, and you don't want to fall too fast. So the government tries to use these policies to either slow the economy down if it's going too fast, or to speed it back up if it's doing poorly. This is fiscal policy. So what is fiscal policy? Let's talk about it. All right, so fiscal policy, first and foremost, what is it? It is the use of government spending and tax revenue to influence the economy. The federal government, the Congress of the United States, can do two things. One, it can spend money on programs to help stimulate the economy, help people buy houses easier, help people get out of poverty easier, provide payments to poor people that need the money, unemployment benefits, things like that. It spends money all the time. It spends money on the military of the United States of America as well. Government is constantly spending money. Well, where does that money come from? It comes from the taxpayers of the United States of America. Every time I get a paycheck, every time you get a paycheck, the federal government will get their piece of that paycheck first, and then you get what's left over after taxes. So this is the responsibility. Fiscal policy, write this down, is the responsibility of Congress, House of Representatives, and the Senate. They can pass laws to make you either pay more in taxes, pay less in taxes. They can also pass laws that will make it easier for them to spend more money, spend less money. And those two things can help the United States of America either increase its spending and increase the economy, stimulate the economy, or they can use it the opposite way. They can slow down the economy by taking some money out of the economy. So let's talk about it. So two tools Congress uses to conduct fiscal policy. That's it. We just talked about it. They can either increase or decrease their spending on certain programs like government and financial welfare programs, medical healthcare programs. They can spend more, spend less. They can ask you for more taxes, or they can ask you for less taxes. Either way, it's going to have an effect on the economy. It just depends on what they're trying to do at the time. Two problems that we have in our economy that they try to stop when it's becoming a problem. One is a recession. Anytime the GDP of our country falls for 6 months or better, it's called a recession. It's bad. It means there's not enough money in our economy. People are losing their jobs. People who lose their jobs don't have money to spend. If they don't spend that money, the people that work in those companies that they could spend the money on, they don't have jobs either. It becomes a bigger and bigger problem. One problem. The second problem is inflation. I know everybody thinks that if everybody's got a job and everybody's making more money, that's a really good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. Remember, anywhere between 2 and 4% inflation is considered healthy. Once you get above 4% inflation, you're actually going to start to have problems. It's actually not a good thing because you lose the value of your money very quickly, and that's a problem. So what do we got next? Boom. Sorry. There we go. So there's two types of fiscal policy. The first part is expansionary fiscal policy. When you think expansionary, think expand. We are going to get bigger. In other words, we're trying to stimulate the economy, make the economy bigger. That's what we need to do. We use this kind of fiscal policy during a recession. So this is something that you might start to see coming up here very soon or right now. You might see the government start to make laws about taxes and spending. They might start to spend more money because they're really looking for the economy to pick back up. People are starting to lose their jobs because of this COVID-19 situation. So what does it do? It encourages economic growth. It helps encourage people to spend more money and get more money. And it increases aggregate demand. What does that mean? Aggregate demand is the demand of everybody in the United States. If you put more money in the hands of people in the United States, that's going to increase people's demand. Remember, it's one of those six determinants of demand that we talk about. If people get more money, they tend to spend it. So if that happens, that expands the economy, that creates more jobs, creates more spending. It's a good thing, especially in a recession. So if we're in a recession and we want to get out of it, would we increase or decrease taxes? Well, I've already got the answers up on the board here. So you would decrease the taxes of the people. In other words, make people in the United States pay less money in taxes so they can hold on to a little bit more of their money. And when we've got more money in our hands, we tend to spend it, which stimulates the economy. And since one person's spending is another person's income, that creates jobs, creates jobs, creates jobs. Do we want to increase the government spending or decrease it? Ding, 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 you got it. We want to increase government spending on programs like helping the poor, helping the needy, get them back on their feet again so they can start spending money as well. That is expansionary policy. Decrease taxes, increase spending. Hopefully the economy will start to pick up again, start to go into an expansion period, which we need right now. All right, then what does it look like when you do this? What should happen to the demand curve? If you remember from our microeconomics, we've got supply and demand. Supply is this curve right here. Demand is this curve right here. All right, so demand is here. What you're going to try to do is get this demand curve to move to the right. If you do that, you can increase prices and increase the amount of stuff that is being made and sold in our economy. So if you can get that demand curve, and this says AD because it's the aggregate demand, the demand of everybody in the economy, you can get that demand curve to shift to the right. What happens is people start to demand more stuff. It increases the price level of goods. Instead of prices down here, you get prices up here. And then that can actually increase the amount of GDP in the economy. Now, again, this is just a theory of something that would help the economy, but it is proven to work at different times throughout our history. All right, so shifting that aggregate demand to the right can create an expansion in the economy, get people to buy again, get people to sell again, hire more workers, all that good stuff. All right, so that creates a higher output, which increases prices as well, gets prices back up. That's what you want to try to do with expansion. All right, so what's the other one? When we start to see prices go up too high and we start to see inflation, the United States government does contractionary fiscal policies. The contractionary fiscal policies are going to try to slow down the economy because, once again, prices going up too high too fast is not good. If we go up too high too fast, we're usually going to find that we crash really hard, and that's no good. So we use this during inflation. We want to try to reduce the economic growth of our economy. We want to try to decrease the aggregate demand of our economy. So if we're experiencing inflation, what do we do to taxes? And again, I've already got the answers on the board here. We want to increase taxes. In other words, make people pay more to the federal government out of their pockets. So that takes money out of the hands of the people, takes it away from them. So then when people have less money, they're less likely to spend it. If they don't spend it, they don't have places to spend it. Those places, everything slows down a little bit in the economy. And that's a good thing if we're experiencing too big a growth. So do we want to increase or decrease government spending when this happens? We want to decrease government spending. Again, we're trying to take money out of the hands of the people because you know how people function. Remember, this is a social science. If people have money in their hands, what are they going to do with it? Most likely spend it. More spending. One person's spending is another person's income, which produces jobs and goods. All right. So if people don't spend, Jobs don't get created, goods don't raise prices. So that slows the economy down, which is a good thing if we are experiencing too high of prices. So once again, we're at this, what do we want to do to demand? If we are seeing prices go up too high, too fast, maybe like 5%, 6% inflation, that's bad. So we want to slow the economy down, take money away from the people. So what do we do to the aggregate demand of the people? Well, we decrease it to the left, right? So what happens then? We decrease the government spending, we increase people's taxes, and it shifts the aggregate demand curve to the left. Instead of having prices up here and GDP over here, we end up getting prices down here and GDP a little lower too. Does it slow down the economy of the United States? Yes, it does. Is that a bad thing? Sometimes, but not necessarily. You need to fight off that inflation. You can't have too high of prices because that's dangerous as well. People can't afford stuff if prices go up too high anyway. All right. That is contractionary. In other words, slow down the economy. That's what we do with taxes and spending. All right. So that creates lower output, not as much stuff being created, less jobs, lower prices. The economy should slow down. Okay. So let's reflect right now. Quiz question. 2 tools that the Congress uses to conduct fiscal policy. Fiscal policy. Congress can do 2 things. What are those 2 things? Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Sorry, I didn't know that. I thought they would show up on this slide. I guess I was wrong. We're going to move to something else. 2 things. They can tax the people, and within that, they can tax more or they can tax less. 2, they can spend money. The government can spend money. They can either spend more or spend less, depending on what they want to try to accomplish. Taxes, spending. Taxes, spending. 2 things that they can do. All right. Okay, so what are some of the schools of thought about how to tax and how to spend? There are different theories out there of how to use this policy, and some of them are named after the people that thought of these policies in the first place. So we got economic schools of thought. What are those? Theories are used to describe the event. So the 3 basic economic theories are classical economic theory, Keynesian economic theory, and supply side theory. And we'll get to each one of those. Let's check them out one by one. All right. Classical economics is just the idea that free markets can regulate themselves. Back in the day before the crash of 1929, the stock market crash that created macroeconomics. Before the stock market crash of 1929, most economists didn't really look at the health of the economy in bunches of different figures. They looked at the stock market and they're like, hey, if the stock market's good, the economy's good. What they really didn't understand is that the stock market wasn't accurate at the time. It was a bubble. And when it burst, people were like, dang, man, I guess we were wrong about this whole stock market thing. Maybe we should have different ways of looking at the economy. Classical economics is very much a hands-off approach to the economy. In other words, if businesses want to get big, let them get big. If people want to trade for the stock market at ridiculous prices, let them do it. If a company fails, don't bail that company out. They failed. That's it. They did it wrong. So that's the idea. Just let the business cycle do what the business cycle does. It will always correct itself given enough time. So that is very laissez-faire, which is a French way of saying hands off, laissez-faire. Let the economy do what it's going to do. So during the Great Depression, this theory couldn't catch much traction because people were suffering at a very strong rate, and it lasted a very long time. Classical theorists all said the same thing. Well, it's going to take a while. You got to give it time to correct itself, but keep your hands off and we'll get through that. The economy will always adjust. The problem was prices dropped during the Great Depression. So demand should have risen during that time because things were so cheap to buy. But consumers couldn't take advantage of those low prices because, well, because consumers didn't have a job during this time. So they couldn't make money to buy those lower priced goods. So demand also dropped, no jobs, no savings. And then the economy just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And when people didn't buy the goods, the people that did have jobs in the first place got laid off of their jobs because they weren't selling any of the products that they made. So more and more and more people started becoming a victim of this economy. And a classical theorist of the economy would go, yeah, it happens. You just got to let it fix itself. Let it fix itself. It'll take time. Well, the problem is this. Over enough time, people would starve to death. Yeah, it'll take time, but during that time, there's going to be millions of people that end up starving to death because they have no jobs. We have to do something. In the long run, we won't have an economy left if this keeps up. So this guy named Keynes came along and said, we need to do something, and we need to do something kind of drastic at this point in order to get our economy moving again. And at the time, it was very radical because it hadn't been done before. But this leads us to our second type of theory of fiscal policy. Maynard Keynes, I believe his name was, John Maynard Keynes was his name. And he said, we need to stimulate demand. In other words, we need people to want to buy stuff again. What's the best way to get people to want to buy stuff? You need to give money to them. And I mean like directly. Give people money from the government so that they can stimulate the economy. Those of you who are keeping track of your parents' situation or maybe the situation in general, you notice that this is happening today. I just received a check from the federal government, a stimulus check for a certain amount of money, free money, and the government is expecting people to use that money and go out and purchase things to stimulate the economy again. And they gave it directly to us. This is what Keynes would say. That's what you need to do. Create demand. Encourages government action, increase or decrease demand and output. And in this particular case, Keynes was saying you need to increase demand and output by giving people money because nobody's working and everybody's losing their jobs. So in the short run, can you do something to change this? This is called Keynesian theory. This is the second fiscal policy theory that we're discussing. Increase demand, or you can actually use it to decrease demand. Okay, so the idea that government spending and tax cuts help an economy by raising demand. The last thing that we're going to study is demand side economics. When you want people to demand more things, you give them money with government spending. And of course, you cut taxes. You take taxes that they normally pay. Somebody pays 30% of their income in taxes. You cut that down to 20%. Well, then that person has a whole lot more money left at the end of the day, month, year, whatever it may be. This hopefully creates more demand in the economy. People say, okay, well, I got money now. I'm not afraid of losing it. Let's go spend it on groceries. Let's go spend it on a new car. Let's go spend it on an apartment. So that creates jobs in the economy. People that make cars, people that build apartments, construction workers need to go to work in order to produce those goods that the people want to buy. And this has what they call a multiplier effect on the economy. Because if you remember our friend from 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, the video about how the economy works. $1 in the economy isn't just a dollar. That dollar gets spent at a store or an auto parts store or at, getting a brake job or painting your house, whatever. The person that gets that money that you spend will take that money and spend it again. So that every $1 of government spending creates more than just $1 of activity. It actually multiplies the activity in the economy. The money goes round and round and round. So that is demand side economics. All right, so then we got supply side economics. This is kind of the same thing, but it's giving money elsewhere, not just to the people, but where is it giving money to? You got it. It's giving money to businesses. So the definition of supply side economics is a school of economics that believes tax cuts can help an economy by raising the supply. So if you cut taxes, you can actually increase the total employment so much that the government actually collects more taxes at the new lower tax rate. And let me explain real quick. If you take a business, right, and this business employs 2,000 people, that's pretty great. It gives 2,000 jobs to the economy. but that business has to pay 35, 39% of its money that it earns to taxes. Well, that's money that that business can use to create more jobs in that business. Maybe they can grow their business. Maybe they can create a whole new business down the road in another state. They can actually start to expand their business if they can hold on to a little bit more of their money and invest it in the business. So what does the government do? It decreases their taxes from 40% to 20%. Now that extra 20% is going to be spent by that business to grow the business. Now they don't employ 2,000 people. They can create 100 more jobs, 200 more jobs, 300 more jobs. So they want to expand. So cut taxes on businesses and let those businesses expand and create more jobs. Again, this theory is very much a supply side theory. And that business, of course, as it grows, will create more goods, and the people that work at those businesses will be able to buy those goods. And once again, the economy is stimulated. All right. Now, here's the deal, though. A guy named Laffer created this curve because people said, well, if we just create enough taxes, in other words, we tax businesses enough, we can get all the money that we need. And then this guy named Laffer said, this is only partially true. The problem is this. When you increase somebody's taxes, what's going to happen is you are going to create a higher percentage tax rate. And as you increase the tax rate, you are going to be able to get more taxes from businesses. However, there comes a point about halfway up this curve where as the tax rate increases, you're going to actually decrease the amount of revenue that you get in the government from the taxes. The reason why is very simple. What Laffer said is, well, over time, if you take away enough of a business's money, if you take away more than enough, well, that business isn't going to be able to grow. As a matter of fact, that business will actually probably shrink. So therefore, they'll start laying off people, create less jobs, and then eventually the government will get less tax revenue over time the more that you tax them. So what he was saying is there's this sweet spot. You can only tax so much before you actually start to lose money. Businesses will go under. They won't be able to thrive. You're taking away too much of their money. So that rate of taxing is always going to be argued, most likely in Congress, as to what that sweet spot is. Currently, right now, the richest people in the United States supposedly pay somewhere around 30 to 32% of their revenue to taxes. But whether or not they pay all of that money is up for debate. So what do we got? Daily reflection. Last one for the term. Differentiate between classical Keynesian and supply side economics schools of thought. Okay, what do we got? Classical, is this going to show the answers? Boom, 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 boom. Okay, classical economics. If you remember it, this is the easiest one. Hands off. Let the market do what the market's going to do. Ups and downs, ups and downs. It's happened forever. It'll continue to happen. You give it enough time, it'll correct itself. Then you got Keynesian economics. Maynard Keynes said, no, man, you got to do something to create a need in people's, create demand in society, in economics. So what do? You give money to people, or you take away money from people, and therefore you're able to increase demand of people, which gets the economy stimulated again, or you're able to decrease demand by taking away money from people, and that kind of slows the economy down over time. Then you got supply side economics, which is basically tax cuts for businesses. You don't give money, you don't spend more, you just tax less or tax more, depending on what you want to do. If you tax less, businesses can increase their businesses because they can grow more, and they don't have to pay as much of their money in taxes. Those are the three different schools of thoughts. Remember those for the end of the week. Okay, so how do you do it? Well, you decrease government spending and increase taxes. If you decrease government spending, people buy fewer goods. You decrease their aggregate demand and you lower production. People can't get the money they need to increase production and hire workers. Then you actually increase the taxes and take money out of people's hands. People have less money to spend on goods. And since one person's spending is another person's income, the economy will slow down. If people don't spend, people don't make money. It's just that simple. And then we go on to the opposite side of things. If you want to stimulate the economy, government needs to spend more money. Give money to people's hands. That's what Maynard Keynes would say. And then on top of that, you could engage in some supply side economics as well. Cut taxes, lower people's taxes so that they can go out and spend more on their businesses, invest more in their own capital, and hire more workers, which increases demand throughout the world. Again, all these are theories, but we've seen them work at different times in the economy. All right, that's it for fiscal policy, guys. Thanks for hanging on for this ride. I know you probably had to shut it down and restart it a couple times because I got too long-winded in there. I'm going to add a few videos this week just to kind of give you guys a little bit more detail on how this works, and then I'll give you a quiz at the end of the week. Give me a call or hit up those office hours with any questions that you got, and I will talk to you soon. Piland out.